Hi, thank you. I'm here to present GraphWeaver from database to API. A little bit about myself. My name is Taylor Nodell. I'm a full stack engineer at Exergy Technologies. We're a consultancy. We make products for different clients. And we just started working on a product called GraphWeaver, which I will tell you about today. A little bit about myself. I'm a musician. I play guitar and I sing. If you want to start a hair metal band with me afterward, come talk to me. I'd love to start a band with you. I'm also a wildlife photographer. I go on hikes and I carry this big camera around and I look for weird animals. This is a California coastal quail. And much like the California coastal quail, I am also invasive and from America. I'm working on my visa. I'm immigrating and yeah, I'm doing the software engineering track and having a great time. And let's talk a little bit about GraphQL. Background on GraphQL. GraphQL stands for graph. Thank you. Pop quiz. And it was developed in 2012 by Facebook and open sourced in 2015. And they were trying to solve this problem, which was like, they have this phone app and they need to get together information about your friends and your friends' posts and the comments on those posts and the likes on those posts. And they were at first approaching this with the traditional REST architecture. So for each of those entities, you had an API endpoints like api.com/Facebook/friends, and then you would get all of the friends for those for that particular person. So you're overfetching some data, and then you have to do that for every single entity that you're requesting. And with REST, you have to make a request, get the response back, and then you can make your next request and get the next response back, and then you have to figure out how to put all that data together in a way that's consumable for your front-end developers. What Facebook did was they went back and said, hey, we've got this graph system in the back end. Can we bring this all the way to the front end? And that's how GraphQL was born. GraphQL lets you request exactly the data that you're requesting and only that. And it does that through queries and mutations. Queries let you get your data. Mutations let you update, create, and delete that data. GraphQL is a typed language where your entities have fields, those fields have types, and those entities have relationships to other entities. And that's all defined in your GraphQL schema definition language. And that looks like this. Let's talk a little bit about the common problems you will face if you're developing a production level app using GraphQL and TypeScript. The first one is that you've probably got multiple data sources. You've probably got a database with something like your orders in it, and you've got a customer CRM in the cloud, Microsoft Dynamics or something, and then you've got invoices stored somewhere like in Xero. And you need a way to see all this data in one place, and you need a way to manipulate it as well. So a naive solution to that would be to start to copy data. You might look at a database and go, I've got this database full of orders. Let me just copy the customer names that live in the CRM and put it in my database. And you don't want to be doing that because you run into synchronization issues, you run into security issues, because now you've got data that's being held responsible for in the cloud is now replicated in your database. And it's just a lot of overhead to keep those things in sync. And another thing you might want to be able to do is to query and filter across that data. So you might want to say, hey, give me all of the orders where the customer's name is Jerry to get all those orders. So how do you do that? Well, you can sit one GraphQL API in front of all those different data sources and allow your GraphQL consumers to make a request to that one API and get all that in one place. And that's exactly what GraphWeaver does. GraphWeaver sits a GraphQL API in front of your Xero, in front of your Microsoft Dynamics, in front of your database, and exposes a single GraphQL API that allows you to access all of your data in one place for each of your consumers, whether they be mobile, web, or desktop apps. Another problem you might run into while you're developing production level app is GraphQL is a type system, and you would hope that you would get those types for free out of the box into your front-end development experience, but you do not. If you're using something like useQuery or Apollo Client, you do not get those types from the API schema, but you could. So for example, if you've got this query on the left here, get to-dos, we're requesting all the to-dos, and you want to have that query be typed. On the right, on the top, we have the type of the query where we're saying, hey, the to-dos that are going to come back, it's an object. We're going to get an array of those to-dos. It's going to have an ID that's a string. It's going to have an is completed flag that's a Boolean. And then you're going to have a user that is its own user interface that has to be defined somewhere else. And that works, but it is a pain to keep synced up, because if you go and change your query to have something like your description on the to-dos, you have to update your types for that query every time you make a change. And when you're rapidly prototyping or building something quickly and things are changing underneath you, this is a lot of overhead that you can avoid. So another approach is that you might type the object that's coming back as the data response. So in the example on the bottom right here, we're saying that the data that we're getting back, we're casting the type and saying that we're going to get an array of the partial of to-dos. And the reason that you have to do that is you've got a to-do object defined on the front end, but you don't know what exactly you're getting back. So now you still have to check for undefined for your ID and your is completed flag and everything on the to-do. So this is a non-ideal solution as well. Well, what can you do? GraphQL CodeGen. GraphQL CodeGen is a product maintained by the Guild. And what GraphQL CodeGen does is it looks at your API using the introspection query. Every GraphQL API has an introspection query that allows you to introspect what is in that schema. And GraphQL CodeGen looks at that, looks at all of the types of queries and mutations and filter input types, and builds up a big JSON data structure. And then it iterates through that JSON data structure using a templating engine. And there's many things you can do to configure what the output of that is. But at the end of that is a typed front-end system for you. And that's exactly what GraphWeaver does. GraphWeaver uses GraphQL CodeGen to provide a smooth front-end developer experience so that when you make a request for your to-dos, you know exactly what you're getting back in that request. And if you think to yourself, hey, I can bring the types from my GraphQL API into my front end, I've kind of already defined my my database schema with the types. Can I bring the types from the database level all the way to the front end? I wouldn't have brought it up if I didn't have an answer. Yes, you can. This is exactly what GraphWeaver does, is it allows you to run a little script that looks at your database and automatically generates the entity and schema files for your resolvers based on what's in your database. So to summarize, GraphWeaver allows you to speed up your GraphQL development by securely connecting all of your data sources in one place. You can connect multiple data sources and expose them in a single GraphQL API and provide a smooth developer experience with GraphQL CodeGen and database introspection. Now, I'm going to give you a little demo of a new GraphWeaver instance. So what I'm going to do here is run this command. Now I've done one thing is I've already got a Postgres database set up. Let's call this GraphQL. Yeah, bigger, yeah. Out of the box, we support Postgres, MySQL, and SQLite database. We'll go with Postgres for now. That's okay. Great. Now we've set that up. Let's jump into. That's funny that that doesn't get zoomed in. Okay. Next thing we need to do is install the dependencies, which is my favorite part because now I have the time to do this. Yeah, and we have a Postgres database set up with users and some dummy data in there. I did that just so that we didn't have to spend the time doing that. And I've also got a MySQL database up and running, and we'll see what two data sources look like when you've got those combined. And once we've got this going, now we can start our GraphWeaver instance, but we won't have anything in there because we haven't connected a data source. This is our admin UI. Let's populate it with a data source using that introspection. We're going to grab another command here. This command is looking at the Postgres database that's running. It's going to ask us a couple questions to connect. Database name, I know that it's GW. The default is good. The default port is good. That's the password. This is the, this is the name of the user. And you get a little summary of what's been imported. It looks a little wonky just because we are zoomed in a bit. And now if we restart our server, we will see our new data source, our Postgres database with our users table. And from here, this is our admin UI, and you can go in and make a change. Let's rename this guy. Mo is now named to Joe. And now that that's been updated, it's been updated at the database level. Let's look at what that code looks like. Quick. So what's been generated is an entities and schema folder, and the entities folder I like to think of as interfacing with the database end. So this is our user table. And then our schema folder contains our GraphQL entities, what's being exposed in the GraphQL API. And then our database is the other file that's important here. This is just our connection to that database. Now that's pretty cool, but let me show you what it looks like for multiple data sources, because I think that's really where the sauce is at. GraphWeaver 2 data sources. Yep, and this is the same database for Postgres, but I also have this MySQL database up and running. This MySQL database is a list of to-dos where the users are stored in the Postgres database. And if you click through, you can jump through to the entity that you've clicked in the other data source. And let's just do one more thing here, which is to query by information in another data source. So here I've got a query that's asking, give me all the to-dos. The to-dos live in the MySQL database, filtered by the users and the user's first name, which lives in the Postgres database. And that's empty because I renamed Mo to Joe. So let's just quickly fix that. And now we're getting the to-dos that are assigned to Joe. So that's how you query across two data sources with GraphWeaver. And just to jump back into our slides here, to quickly summarize, a couple of use cases for GraphWeaver. The out-of-the-box one is to build your own GraphQL API. You saw you could do that in a couple minutes. You can use it as a backend for front ends so that your front-end developers have this one interface for all of their queries. And you can use it as a headless CMS. We've integrated with Eventbrite and Contentful to sort of make our own headless CMS. Some key features of GraphWeaver, instant GraphQL API. You saw that. Instant like instant noodles. Takes like 2 minutes. Multiple data sources. We saw that Postgres and MySQL database example with the cross-source filtering. We have granular permissions with row and column level security. And we also have role-based authorization and a couple of cool features like one-time passwords and magic touch logins. It's 100% open source. It's on GitHub under the MIT license. You saw the admin panel. So out of the box, you get this great grid that allows you to interface and manipulate and view data. We take a code-first approach here. So it allows you to write your own business logic however you'd like. And you saw the code generator as well, which allows you to spin up a new GraphQL API from a database really quickly. Any questions? So that was a rapid introduction to GraphQL. Sure.
You talked about making dynamics 0. What was that like?
We have a couple of examples here. So we've connected to things like MailChimp, and 0 is sort of the example that I can think of immediately. So let's jump into the actual, this one. This is the project. We have examples for AWS Cognito. Don't look at Salesforce yet. Still working on that one. Yeah, let's pop open 0. Yeah. Yeah, and so per connection that you're looking at, you're gonna interface with a different resolver. So let's pop open this. You have to define what you're looking at. You have to say you're extending the GraphQL entity. Yeah,
I'm assuming this is not entire zero API.
no, this is an example of how you would interface with the zero API. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What other examples? REST, so you can wrap arbitrary REST API.
Yeah. So the REST API for this one is it's a Star Wars API that just lets you get the names of Star Wars heroes. There's an in-memory filter that allows you to do like ors and ands on it. Yeah. Yeah. Was there another question in the back?
Sort of you started from introspecting the database during the past. Can you start without any data?
Can you? Yeah. If you don't have to introspect the database. That's just a quick way to spin up a new GraphQL. Yeah. You can write these entities like this. So you would write a backend entity. So in this case, for the REST example, you have a user, you're extending this base entity. You can jump into what that means. But then you hop over to the GraphQL entity, and this describes what is being exposed on the GraphQL API. And then in your resolver, you can do a lot of custom logic. But then what you do is you pass your resolver into the final GraphWeaver instance, which comes out as an array of resolvers. And actually, this is where you would put trace schema in your example. I was like, oh, we use the same language. Yeah. Sorry?
It's just next to the schema at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Where are you defining a relationship between the MySQL and Postgres database?
That exists in the database layer. So the to-do in the MySQL database has a column that's like user ID. So that exists already on that point, and then we're just pulling that through to the front end.
Is there sort of like a code file, something that defines that relationship?
Yes, because we have to define that. Yeah, let me just jump over to the two data sources example. It's basically a foreign key ID. It says, hey, yeah, I have something that is represented in a different database. Yeah. Yeah. Another question in the back, yeah? Yes. Yep, we're using MicroRM for the database examples, SQLite, MySQL, and Postgres. Yeah. Yes, theoretically. Those are the three we definitely support. It would be easy to extend that to the other MicroRM supported. For now, we're going to use MicroRM. I know we've talked about implementing our own, but it doesn't make sense for us to do that at this point. Yeah. Yeah. And PRs are welcome. So, yeah. All right. If that's it, thank you guys so much.
Just check the file.
Oh, yeah. Are there any questions in the chat?
Not at this stage, Taylor. I think one final call for questions from online. Punch them in now before we wrap up. No, I think that's all.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.